Hi, Cath.
Hello, it's good to see you again.
Hi, Cath. So thank you for joining me today. It's going to be really useful, I think, for a lot of our students and our staff members, really. But I won't introduce myself, as I've done that, I think, on about 100 different videos now. But obviously, you know that I'm from the University of Chester, and you're just here today to kind of go through more about your organisation, what it does, what it can do to support people, and how to get in touch with it and access it, really. So if you wouldn't mind just kind of introducing yourself and a bit about Restitute, which is the organisation that we're here to talk about today.
No problem at all. So my name's Cath Pickles. I am the founder and the CEO of Restitute. We support, and I'm going to get this right, we support the parents, the carers, the partners, the loved ones, the mums and dads, the granddads of anybody who has survived sexual abuse, sexual violence, or other serious violence. And we set up as a lived experience organisation because when our daughter survived sexual abuse as a child, we found ourselves fighting our way through a system that was incredibly confusing, that nobody seemed to know what anybody else was doing at any particular point. I have to say that sometimes I feel like I'm a terrible warning rather than a good example, but then sometimes that's the best position to come from. And we knew that there were other parents like us out there who needed support. And we come from the position that if you have a child who is a child or an adult or a family member who has survived really, really significant trauma, then they need the opportunity to be living in an environment which is the best it possibly can be. There's no point in taking a really, really traumatized child and therapizing it for an hour, for example, and then dropping it back into a home that is in chaos, that is distressed, that is dealing with all the secondary trauma with other children who maybe don't understand, who are confused about the system. So if we can get the parents and the carers fighting fit, then that is the best way of making sure that good outcomes happen for the survivors as well. So that's what we set out to do. And we started in 2019. And we thought we'd support between 6 and 12 families in that first year. Well, we took our first client on in December 2019. We're now, October 23?
Yeah.
380 families later.
Wow.
Yeah, it went a bit mad, I think is the safest way to say. But it obviously evidences the fact that there is an enormous amount of need for what we do. And also we have great success. Let's be celebrating that.
Yeah.
What we do works.
Yeah.
And that makes me really, really proud.
Yeah, and as it should do. I think it's one of those things where, like, high numbers across the sector, in an ideal world we'd want none, wouldn't we? But I think what it shows is that there's a need for that service, and it's obviously doing what it needs to be doing for people to be coming to you for that support, for that help. I think that's absolutely fantastic that you've been able to provide support to that many people and families.
Yeah, I mean, that's 380 families, and most families have got an average of 3 or 4 people in them. So it's over 1,000 now.
My understanding is that, there's no, in terms of the primary victim that is part of the family or the partners that you support, I think, because we spoke quite a bit about like child abuse, but it's not an age restriction, is it? I don't.
Nope. So just to explain exactly what we do, that will probably be better.
Yes.
So we will support anyone who is a family member who has caring responsibilities for someone who has survived this kind of crime. Now, that could be someone who is caring for a 6-month-old baby, right the way through to someone who is caring for an 84-year-old granny. It doesn't matter what age you are or what age it happened. It doesn't matter whether this has been reported to the police or it doesn't. We do 3 things, which would probably be quite useful for me to explain. So everybody gets a one-to-one support worker. Okay, you will not get passed around a system. You will come to us and one person will get to know you and your family and your family's needs and your priorities and your situation really, really well. And that's proactive support. We will make weekly appointments with you to start off with. You will have tasks that we need you to complete that will really help you focus your mind and get you going again. Because so many of our families end up sitting on the bottom step playing Candy Crush while the washing piles up, the bills pile up because they're just so completely overwhelmed. with everything that's going on. So what we really need to do is really need to get you going again. Yeah. And sometimes that means having someone really who's a bit of a cross between a very bossy auntie and the best PA in the world, but who has the skills and the knowledge and the experience and the understanding of the system, to make sure that you are being supported by the other statutory agencies, perhaps, who should be, and working together so they understand exactly what's happening with you. So that's the first thing we do. The second thing is practical support where we can. There's no point in you having a priority, for example, of getting a housing benefit form sorted out, or trying to move house, or trying to deal with getting your car to an MOT, or trying to fill in something else, or trying to deal with something complicated. If every time you open the back door, and I've told you this anecdote before, so forgive me, if every time you open the back door, the dog escapes from the garden because the fence has fallen down at the back, you're never going to be able to concentrate on that form or that thing that's important. So fix the damn fence, you know. And we know that for a lot of our families, there is one of the biggest issues they face is sudden catastrophic financial devastation, because it's not just families who, you know, if you have a perpetrator removed from the house, for example, or from your family setup, or from your wider social network, that person may be providing childcare, that person may be the person who's the driver in the house, that person may be paying half the mortgage. And suddenly all of that support is taken away, and a lot of the financial commitments that you will have made, or the lifestyle that you're currently living, will be based on your previous income, and will literally overnight that crashes. And if, for example, just using an example, say it's your brother-in-law who is the perpetrator, yeah, well, that's your sister out of the question immediately. Okay, so any practical support that your sister might have given you has now gone, because she will inevitably side with her husband. Yeah. So if you've lost your sister, there's very good chance that you might have lost your the grandparents in that family. You've lost potentially childcare. You've lost Christmas presents. And now I know it sounds ridiculous, but at this time of year, it's actually quite important. You know, that's Christmas presents from an entire side of a family that siblings or children in that family will no longer receive. They will feel punished. Yeah. Because she said something. I'm not getting a Christmas present off Granny this year. I'm not going on that holiday anymore. I don't get to see my cousins anymore. And this is the kind of weight of guilt that primary victims have to face.
And I think when we've spoken previously, if you told me about like some type of like therapeutic support that people can receive at Restitute, so it'd be great to hear a bit more about that, but I think as well about how that links into the other support that you've mentioned, and when that might be appropriate, and how that might look like as well.
So what usually happens is that we'll have a family that's referred to us. We'll assign them a support worker. They'll do some work with them for about 6 weeks, and they will start to make progress on their particular goals. And what we usually find is that after 6 weeks, things are beginning to significantly improve. And with the practical support, and feeling empowered, and feeling that they are a part of the solution, whereas previously they've been made to feel blamed or isolated or ashamed, or that this is their fault. We move them from that position to a position where they feel like they are really part of the solution. With the practical support that we can offer, if we can offer it, we usually find that most people are making really good progress at that point. The automatic assumption that everybody is going to need therapy is completely wrong, actually. What we do find, though, is that those who are most likely to need therapeutic support to deal with what has happened to their loved one will be those who have been primary victims, of course, in the past. Because then you end up, to use my favourite phrase, you end up with this massive trauma party going on in your head, where what's happened to your child or your loved one or your partner is now happening to, it brings up all the memories and all the stuff that happened to you. That could be the actual assault or abuse yourself that you suffered, but it could be your experience of trying to deal with that either through the criminal justice system or through the education process. There are numerous triggers that go beyond the original abuse. I've literally just got off a call with a client who basically can't see a police car without having a classic trauma response of wanting to hide, heightened raised heart rate, palpitations, fear, anxiety, those kinds of things. And for a lot of our clients, it's that layering that causes the trouble. So for those clients who do need it, we do have a therapeutic offer. But as I said, what we're actually discovering is only really about 10% of people need that. What they actually need is they need emotional support. They need tools to be able to manage their loved one's behavior or to support their loved one in their recovery. They need empowerment in terms of education about the systems. They need advocacy when you're trying to work in those systems. So, for example, someone calling out the police if they're taking forever and ever and ever, if they aren't doing something. They need someone to sit in on child protection meetings or child in need meetings, or they need somebody to help them negotiate the disabled student allowance, which, let's face it, is a, you know, or work with the universities about the types of accommodation that somebody needs. To have those conversations and actually say the words for the person, so that they're not having to re-traumatize themselves by saying, I am a survivor of sexual abuse, therefore I cannot be on a ground floor flat. You know, actually somebody else saying this person needs to be in a first floor flat, they need to be in this particular environment. Maybe a mixed environment isn't going to work, and actually having those conversations rather than expecting the primary victim or the primary victim's family to have those conversations, which can be massively important. And I'm sure that your work, actually, you find yourself having to do this as well.
Yeah, I think that's the point of so much of this, isn't it? Is that it's so overwhelming when someone might try and find out what they're meant to do after experiencing this, or someone tells them they've experienced sexual violence, because there is a lot out there, but trying to understand the difference between all of these different organizations, charities, whether it's NHS, whatever it might be, it's really hard to navigate that and understand what's best, what support you need, what help there is. And I think a lot of the time it reflects what you said. It's actually those things which might seem smaller that are so much harder.
Shall I tell you something? When we very first started having the idea of putting Restitute together, we knew that actually we felt like a little cog in the middle of a massive wheel. That we were trying to coordinate everything. And so as about 3 of us, we sat down and we went, right, let's make a list of everybody that we've ever had to have the conversation with that started, there's something you need to know before you treat, meet, greet, work with, look after, whatever, my loved one. Well, it took us 20 minutes. We came up with 98 different organisations or people or groups of people. And that was putting all the teachers in one box, by the way. But you cannot, for example, opticians. Yeah. Okay, so let's put you in a dark room. With somebody who's basically going to strap or make you put your face in one particular position, and then I'm going to put my face this far from yours, and you expect to survive that experience without getting punched. And if you don't explain it, that is what is going to happen. We had one primary victim who was also a third-party victim as well, whose dentist was extraordinary, and they booked out the entire morning.
Wow.
3 hours in order to be able to give this lady the dental treatment that she needed.
Oh, that's just incredible.
Well, if you think about it, without putting it into too much detail, let's lie you back on a couch and start sticking things in your mouth without, when you feel completely and utterly powerless and in pain. And there are a great many people for whom that is why they don't go to the dentist. Because it is far too triggering. And well, I mean, I don't like going to the dentist anyway, but and that isn't my lived experience. So can you imagine if that was your lived experience of
no, completely.
some bloke basically shoving things into your mouth without you really feeling like you're in control and being told don't move? Yeah, it's not going to end well, is it?
No, not at all. Not at all.
It's a tip of the iceberg, though. I mean, the reality is something like 500,000 people suffer sexual abuse or sexual violence every year. And there's an estimated 11 million people in this country who have survived that at some point. So you only need to consider the number of families that are dealing with this.
Yeah,
it's an absolute endemic public health emergency.
Yeah, no, absolutely it is. I think it's such a key thing to remind people that this is actually a public health emergency, in my opinion, one of the biggest, because as you said, that 11 million figure is, as you refer to, as a primary victim, right? And that is not even taking into consideration people who might have witnessed it, people who are supporting that person, and the knock-on effect on all aspects of that person's life and their family's life. So it always just makes me a bit speechless, I think, when you think about it in that way, because it's just, I'm not sure if there's anyone it doesn't affect in some way, really, sexual violence.
I think what we actually have to think about is what happens next.
Yeah.
Well, in immediate families, there is a predictable outcome for people, a horrible predictable outcome for people who have survived sexual abuse or sexual violence, particularly sexual abuse as children. That is a pathway that increased risk of drug and alcohol abuse, of homelessness, of family breakdown, of prison population, of criminality, of criminal exploitation, of sexual exploitation, and early death. Now, that isn't, I'd like to say we're going to be able to prevent sexual abuse or sexual violence. I think we must all have that in mind. But in the meantime, if we can keep families together, if we can support them, if we can support them to get really good outcomes for their kids when they are little and create a therapeutic environment, we can reduce those risks. And it's not something that can be medicalized. You know, my child has been sexually abused, therefore my child gets therapy, is not going to be the only solution to this. It never will. And we need to look much wider to the range and the amount of support that's needed.
Yeah, absolutely. And I feel like this word's become a bit of, oh, sorry. Okay. I feel like this word's become a bit of a buzzword, but I think like being holistic in the approach to all of this is so paramount, I think, to everyone involved in it, because as you said, it's that almost like ripple effect and the knock-on effect that it can have on every aspect of someone's life. And what good is it just focusing on one very important part of it if we're not going to look at everything else that's going on for that person, their family, for anyone that might be affected by it.
Siblings are the people who are completely forgotten about. And the level of trauma that they face, the breakdown in communication between siblings and the breakdown in the relationship because the sibling is either accidentally neglected because the parent is working so hard to try and keep their other child alive. Huge amounts of anger in teenage boys, particularly, whose families get broken down and they have no understanding of why. I've actually heard teenagers and young boys say, if she hadn't said anything, my dad would still be here. Which in their mind is how they have processed that information. Not if my dad hadn't done this, my sister wouldn't be in this mess. And then on top of that, other siblings becoming very, very angry and defensive to the remaining parent. If the remaining parent is then struggling with really challenging behaviour from the primary victim, siblings get quite cross if mum ends up having to deal with someone who's angry or is going missing from home or is taking drugs or alcohol. And so they get very cross with the primary victim too, with very little understanding about all of that kind of thing. We get disrupted education. We get little boys who are angry at women, who then become very angry and impulsive, poor educational outcomes, which then makes them potentially more liable to commit violent acts of violence and with a negative attitude towards women, to perpetrate domestic violence or to engage in toxic masculinity, for example. So those are just some of the ripple effects that we're trying to challenge.
Yeah, no, absolutely. And do you support siblings as well?
We always work through a lead family carer. So we want to empower a lead family carer to basically be the solution within their own family, because empowerment is really, really important. So we ask them to identify the needs of all of their family, as well as the primary victim, but themselves, both emotionally and practically and therapeutically. And then we help them to do that. So we work through a lead carer. We have several siblings who are receiving therapeutic support at the moment to understand their thoughts and feelings of what's happened, either with their relationship with the perpetrator, with other family members, or simply because they have seen things which they really did not need to say. We've had a few siblings who have actually walked in on their other sibling suffering abuse, who then have to deal with the trauma of that, and then the moral trauma of siblings perhaps sometimes who thought there was something going on and didn't say anything. What I can tell you is that we've never worked with a primary carer, a primary parent, who has had any inkling whatsoever that abuse was happening in their home, despite some of the really appalling things that we've heard said by professionals, like a GP who turned around to one of our parents and said, "Surely you must have known." She's like, "What? Really? You think she would have known?" No, we've never had a primary carer who had any inkling. And that is the kind of misinformation, stigmatization that actually causes family isolation, which then causes poor mental health, which then causes family breakdown. You know,
it must be so infuriating.
Our carers are innocent victims, and frankly, if they weren't, they wouldn't still have care of that child, because never has a parent been under more scrutiny than a parent whose child has disclosed sexual abuse.
Yeah, absolutely. I think it's really interesting, because we often talk about like these like rape busting myths and things like that, but this is clearly such an area that like doesn't often get included within those. It is those rape myths about people who aren't that primary victim and that support around it. It's such a good point, actually, that doesn't really ever come into it. In my experience, from what I see a lot of the time, it's much more focused, on that primary victim. So
the thing is that as a society, the safest place for us to go is that we have to find a reason why this couldn't happen to our family. Okay, so we come from a position of there must be someone to blame. There must be a reason that this happened to this family, because if there is no reason, then if it could happen to them, it could happen to me. Yeah. The reality is that there are no particular groups or families that this happens to more often. I have worked with consultant surgeons, I have worked with policemen, I have worked with social workers, teachers, mental health nurses, all the families that you'd think were most or least likely for this to happen to. I've worked with them and it's happened to them.
Yeah.
I was a primary school teacher.
Yeah.
It happened to us. Fortunately, it wasn't within our direct family, but it has happened. It can literally happen to anyone. But that is a really, really uncomfortable truth that most people find incredibly difficult to sit with. So they look for someone to blame, and the easiest people to blame are the parents, or the carers, or the partners. Where were you? Why didn't you do this? How didn't you see? And the simple answer to that is because I didn't. And they're not to blame. And most parents, or carers, partners, feel that they should have been able to see something, do something, stop something. And I'm really, really sorry to actually say, perpetrators of these crimes are insidious, sneaky, clever, very often, powerful often, and they will groom the victim. They will hide what they're doing incredibly effectively, and are utterly plausible members of society. The only thing we can do is, as soon as we know about it, is get support. We did a video recently, and with some primary victims, about what it felt like with their family, and guilt was something that came up time and time again. They want to know, is my mum okay? They want to know, is my mum okay with me, with what I've said? Because 9-year-olds are aware of the bomb that they are about to drop on their house. You know, they know that actually if I tell anyone this, it's going to cause absolute chaos, which is why the average age of disclosure for children is 14, when the abuse often happened years and years and years before, and it's only when they start suffering really, really significant mental health issues or behaviour issues, or it becomes visible that there is something significantly traumatic wrong that nobody, you know, perhaps in statutory agencies can ignore anymore, that they actually disclose. And they delay because they are so aware of the damage that this is going to cause. So it's not okay for us to just say to children or young people, if something happens, you must tell. We must tell those children back. And when you do, we will look after you, and we will look after your family, and we will make sure that your mum and your brother and everybody else is okay. And I think if we actually presented that, we'd end up in a situation where children were more likely to disclose more quickly.
Yeah, absolutely.
Insight is a horrible thing.
Yeah, it really is, but it's so just so important, isn't it? Because it's you know, I think like in like my professional experience, when we've thought that we've been really good at like making it really clear who like our service supports or this and that, and then we have feedback and it's kind of echoes similar to that. It's like, well, you say that anyone can access it, but we don't really feel like that's necessarily true in our experiences, or we don't know what that means after that point, or how we'll be treated because I'm LGBT, for example. And it's just, I think so much of that messaging gets like forgotten about, doesn't it? Like, actually, you can tell me, but what does that mean to that person when they tell you? What's going to happen after? What's going to be the benefit of them telling you when they just don't know, especially when they're a child as well, because why would they?
But
know
being a
what
child
happened?
actually doesn't insulate you from having this insight and awareness of what that information that you disclose is going to do. You know, so if a 9-year-old can work it out, a 19-year-old's not going to have any problem at all. You know, which is why so many people who suffer sexual violence as adults can actually look at the bigger picture and go, I'm going to have to suck this up, because you know, the choices to me are this enormous damage that is going to be caused to me and my family, or I can manage this on my own and that huge bomb won't go off over there.
Yeah, absolutely.
So
it's it's horrible, isn't it? You know, I think it's so needed to be spoken about.
Unless we get to the point where we actually accept that disclosure is not the solution, or it is part of the solution, but what actually has to happen next is far wider and has far more ripples everywhere, then we're not going to solve anything.
Yeah, definitely.
I just want to go back to something that you said a moment ago, because you were talking about witnesses. So the current criminal justice system, if you have your bag snatched, and you are a victim of crime, if your friend who is walking down the street witnesses your bag being snatched, you are a victim of crime. Okay, the victims code is going to kick in perfectly for both of you two. Okay, you are entitled to support, you're entitled to all kinds of different elements through the victims of crime. If you then can't leave your house for the next 6 months or a year, and your mum has to basically provide you with all the care that you need, and 6 months was in the bag snatching, I'm just taking that as a reasonable time of recovery, but imagine this is sexual abuse or sexual violence, so we're talking decades. And somebody then has to take on caring responsibilities for you, because you cannot actually manage your day-to-day life. You cannot leave the house. There are transport issues that you can't deal with, finances that you can't deal with, that your education gets completely screwed up. That person who is taking care of you, not a victim of crime. It's just bonkers.
It's tragic, isn't it, really, because it's such a significant impact on, and it's such a significant impact on everyone, but then I think to kind of have that put back on you, that, well, actually you're not considered a victim, when this has completely disrupted their life as well and completely impacted every day of that 6 months that you've used as an example. How can they not be considered
And
a
there's
victim.
evidence now which is coming out, and our evidence certainly shows that particularly the mothers of children who survive sexual abuse are as traumatized as the primary victim themselves. And this is coming through in evidence from vast majority of other organisations who are involved in supporting primary victims. So yeah, it's huge, and we desperately want to change the law to include basically people who are left with caring responsibilities to be able to be included in as victims of crime, so that they can then access the statutory services they want. Because at the moment, the only statutory services that support people like me is the Care Act 2014, and most carers organisations do not have a Scooby-Doo about what the needs of people like me are. So yeah, and but a lot of them don't even recognise people who are caring for survivors of violent or sexual crime as carers.
Yeah, definitely.
Joy.
Yeah, I mean, it just, there's such a ginormous, it doesn't even cover it, does it, amount of work, I think, still left to do to actually make sure that everyone that is affected by whatever form of sexual violence does actually have some form of support available to them. How do people get support from Restitute? How can they access it?
So it's actually really easy. I'm assuming that you're going to put up a lovely link to our website. So on our website there is an area where it says contact Restitute. There is a contact form. You fill in that form, and we will get in contact with you as soon as we possibly can. We're always looking to be in contact with people within a working week, and then arranging that initial appointment within 2 weeks of that. I'm not going to pretend we aren't busy. I'm not going to pretend that we don't have a waiting list. However, what we do is triage. So if we come across a family where there is significant crisis issues, if there is an immediate issue that needs quickly to be solved, then we will help those first. We will help people in need, in the greatest need. And I've got to say that very often that could be because the carer is struggling with suicidal feelings. And I think that that's the fairest way that we can do this, but we will get to everybody. So, and it doesn't matter where you live. I think that's really important. So although we were born and bred in Suffolk, we are supporting people all over the UK now. And we do it very much like this video. So although we don't record it, we use video calls to support 99% of our clients. And the main reason we do it is because they love it. You know, this is private. Well, obviously that's recording, this isn't private. But a video call in the privacy of your own home at a time that works for you. You don't have to explain to anyone where you're going. You don't have to cross a threshold into a building that everybody knows is something. You don't need to arrange childcare. You don't need to arrange transport. You don't have to pay for childcare or pay for transport. So this is cheap, private, convenient. And frankly, if you're 5 minutes late, no one is going to worry, because you'll have sent them a message saying, I'm just going to the loo or whatever. Can I have 5 minutes? So it means that our DNA rate is virtually zero, because people pitch up. You know,
of course.
And we've got that flexibility, and you've got that flexibility as well. And the outcomes that we achieve this way are absolutely outstanding. And when we do eventually meet with our clients, and we do try to meet all of them face to face at some point, it's usually a fantastic thing. That is, although sometimes we do discover that people are a lot taller or a lot smaller than you think they are.
I know, you can never tell, can you, through Teams?
You can't. It's always the one thing. It's the one thing that you don't know whether you should be looking there or there.
No, it's so true.
I always warn people that I'm a lot shorter and a lot fatter than I look like on a video screen. And then there's no expectations for somebody, although they all know that I'm going to look a bit scruffy.
I think it's great though, because it's just making these support services actually accessible for as many people as possible. Because, and also I think as well, like a lot of the time, regardless of what an appointment might be, if it's in person, if you think of like the time it takes to get there, and if you're in waiting rooms and things like that, it's not just the time, that's the like build up of anxiety that might come with that.
Absolutely.
And because I get that just going to the doctors, and I think you know, I remember through COVID when it was on the phone, for me it was far less like anxiety inducing, because I just pick up the phone and have that call. Whereas, I don't know, you just have a lot more time to think about what you're going there for, don't you, I guess? So
I think mainly the convenience and the cost is the most valuable thing for people, and the privacy.
Yeah.
You know, I mean, we've had people talk about a stream of people coming up to their front door wearing lanyards. You know, it's just like yet another, oh, who's that? We've all got neighbours, you know, so all your privacy is gone, you know. So just actually having these conversations in your own home is, it can be a hell of a lot better. And it wasn't what we intended originally, but we did it during COVID, and it just worked so well. And of course, the main advantage is it means there's so many more people that we can support, because
absolutely,
because we can get to them, and for us, the cost of supporting those people in those areas is so much reduced as well.
So
definitely. That's why we do it like that.
I find it really frustrating if like, as in the professional capacity, if you're supporting someone, you find service, you think that looks amazing, but it's not local, and then they are missing out on that. And I think that's what is so beneficial as well about services being national, because we are in a place now where I think it's a lot more straightforward how we provide these services remotely, and it just means that you're not having someone in one location having just one service to support them, compared to a different location where there's a lot more, like, more tailored support, like Restitute, where it's actually relevant to a lot of people that don't get that.
We will always need to be covering a wide geographical base, because financially, let's be realistic about it, it is not feasible for me to have a front door in every high street, in every town, in every county. It's just not financially feasible for me to do that. But I've got this front door here. That is just as accessible, that our clients consistently feedback works for them. It can be a little entertaining sometimes with our funders who think that everything has to have a front door on their local high street. But we are a specialist niche service.
Definitely.
You know, I hope not, but we're unlikely to ever be in a situation where we have 5,000 people on our books in one area, like a GP surgery, you know? So we need to be able to offer the service the way that we do.
And can professionals refer, like, someone they're supporting on their behalf, as long as they're happy?
So long as they've got consent. So going back to that area on our website where it says contact Restitute, if you read the first 3 lines, which actually is quite hilarious because an awful lot of professionals don't bother to read the words, they're just looking at forms going, where do I fill in, where do I fill in? It says, if you are a professional wanting to refer a client with consent, please use this form, click on that form. And then basically it allows us to capture your details as well as your client's details, which means that with their consent, we can then let you know as the referrer that we have now got that family. Which can be, from my own personal point of view, being able to cross somebody off your list to really, really worry about, knowing that they are getting the support that they need is hugely reassuring. So if you do make a referral to us, we will let you know when that they've engaged with us and that we are making efforts to support them.
I think that's really important. I think it just is so, I don't know what the word is really half the time talking about this, because I hate that we have to have these services anyway, but I just think it's so incredible that there is this support being actually made available to so many people, and that you are so, in terms of who you support, that you it's not just parents, it could be anyone that's considered a carer, it could be a partner, as you said, it could be siblings. It's really looking at that whole wider circle around that primary victim. I think it'd be really good to know what you find is the best part of your job, or why you do this, why you continue to do it when it can be such a hard area to be in.
It can be, and it is. I think the things that I find the hardest now, I will come on to the best things in a minute, is actually looking for the pennies down the back of the sofa. I'm not going to pretend it isn't at the moment. The funding issue, in terms of why we carry on doing it, because it works. Bottom line is, I mean, I was thinking about this just before we came on this call. Okay, I've currently got, or had, 4 or 5 clients who I started working with in their last year in school. The primary victim was in their last year at school. All of those kids are now in university. All of them are doing well in their courses, are living a really good life at university and are actually doing their thing at university. Because empty nest syndrome for parents when kids are going away to university is horrible. Yeah, it's horrible anyway. If your child has suffered significant trauma and is either just been through a court case or is in the process of the criminal justice system grinding its way through the system, it's horrendous. Your anxiety levels when your child leaves home are off the scale. But we can do so much prep work with those parents. We have done so much prep work with those parents. So actually they were able to manage their own emotions, which means they didn't inflict is the wrong word, but they didn't add their anxieties onto their child's anxieties, and they're all doing really well. And it's just about now that we will start getting inquiries and referrals from parents of kids who have gone to university, who have survived sexual abuse or sexual violence in the past as children, and sadly whose kids at university are really, really struggling. It's about now that we get them, after about months to 6 weeks after the start of term. And it breaks my heart, because I know that if I'd had those families in my care a year ago, the outcomes would be so much different. So that keeps me going. And I think actually the other sort of like slightly personal thing, the reason I keep going, is that I look at my own daughter now, and I look at the monumental cock up that I made in various different ways in actually supporting her to survive this, simply because I didn't actually know what I was doing. And I think, so I did some of the wrong things. I handled situations badly. My own anxiety was so through the roof that it actually was making her more unwell than it was actually helping her, because my own needs were just completely, I was just freaking, if I'm honest with you. But she's now living independently. She is has got a boyfriend. She goes and plays darts, of all things, down at the local pub. She is still living with quite significant physical and mental health disabilities, but she is actually alive. And if you told me when she was 19 that she would still be alive at the age of 26, I would have laughed at you, because we'd mourned her death by that point. That sounds horrible, but it's true. The only way that we could live with the terrifying knowledge that she would either die by suicide or by accidental self-harm and inflicting a fatal injury was to accept that she wasn't going to live past 21. And she's 26 now. And she's brilliant. And actually starting Restitute actually helped her too, because suddenly I was busy. Suddenly I was giving her space. And I know that sounds really awful, but I was actually doing something else, which meant that I wasn't spending every single minute of every single day panicking about whether she was alive or not. And that gave us both the space for her to be able to recover, because like I said, I didn't do this right. So I do use my lived experience of how not to do it very often as a way of supporting other families as well. And I do still, even though I'm the CEO, I do still carry a small caseload, because it's really useful for me to keep my support work hand in.
Absolutely. No, thank you so much for sharing that as well, because I think it's just, there is no, well, there's more now for things like Restitute, but there's no real guide on what to do a lot of the time, is there? And I think we react with our emotions and how we think we're doing things right, and what we think that person needs and what we need. But I think it's only when you're in a place where you can actually reflect and think separately from it that you can see how you wish things had been done differently, or you wish you, as you said, you'd had that space. And I think it's just such a massive testament, isn't it, to the work that you're doing at Restitute, and how important it is to have these services actually informed by people who have gone through these really horrific, awful, life-changing situations, whatever we want to refer to them as.
Absolutely.
Because I think you know what works and what doesn't.
And also for the people who are coming into our service to actually be met and greeted and supported by someone who actually gets it is a huge comfort.
Completely.
Is a massive comfort.
Yeah, no, absolutely. Thank you so much for talking. I think we could probably go on for about another 3 hours, couldn't we? But thank you so much, because I know that you gave me strict instructions at the start, 11:55. But thank you so much. I think we've covered an awful lot in here, which is really useful about Restitute, but also just, I think, really useful on the wider topic of it as well. And I really think that a lot of people are going to watch this and resonate with what's been said, and hopefully, I mean, you might get a massive influx of referrals coming your way, so
don't worry, that's always a risk. That's always a risk, but we're very happy to hear you. Please use the referral form, because otherwise we are a small team. We will lose things if people start sending me random WhatsApp messages and that kind of thing. And hopefully later on this year, sometime in the academic year, we can come and visit and I can come and meet you guys. So that'd be really fantastic.
Yeah,
I'd love that.
Really great, definitely. Thank you so much, Cath. I'll let you get on with your day, but thank you so much for talking about everything and so openly as well.
You're very welcome. It's been lovely to meet you.
Enjoy the rest of your day.